My name is Ken Bissenden, and I'm interviewing Reed Embley for Blakemore's office, Congressman Blakemore's office for the Veterans History Project. Reed, I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you.
So let's start out way back when. Where are you actually from?
I was born and raised in Gunnison, Utah. Lived there until graduated from high school and then moved away and have not been back since, so to speak.
Okay, so what about your parents? Who were they?
My dad was Hank Leon Embley, was Henry Leon Embley. He ran a furniture, carpet, hardware store. I worked there as a kid, where I learned my capability of interacting with people and stuff like that. Mom worked with him. She did a lot of the paperwork and that type of thing. Her name is Benneth Roper Embley. And my whole family comes from the Gunnison area, there, including my uncles and aunts. So I was surrounded constantly by family, etc. I have two brothers and a sister. My sister has since passed away, and so I've got two brothers left and a myriad of nephews and nieces.
Okay. What was it like growing up in?
Boy, the thing that was neat about Gunnison is the fact that it is a very small town.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's neat in one way, and that's that, everybody knew everybody, but that also made it as a teenager, if you did something wrong, your parents were going to hear about it.
But you didn't have that problem, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course not. But Gunnison, small town mentality, small town capability. The reason I left Gunnison was opportunity. There just wasn't a lot of opportunity there. I guess I could have taken over my dad's store, but at the time that wasn't what I wanted to do, and so moved away from Gunnison.
So did you meet your wife in Gunnison?
I did. We high school sweethearts, got married way too young.
How young?
She was 16, I was 17.
That's way too young.
Yeah, that's way too young. But we're 57 years into it and still tolerating each other. So we've done well. We've got 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. They've done well, and very proud of them and what they've accomplished, and face the same challenges that you or anybody else does as a parent, going up through life. School.
You did apparently through high school there?
I did. I graduated from Gunnison Valley High School. That's, I think it was a pretty good school. A lot of things in school has changed now. A lot of things in Gunnison have changed. Gunnison is a kind of a hunting town now, and that's almost your priority. Yeah, you work, but every spare minute you have, you're going to be hunting, etc. Whereas when I was a kid, yeah, we hunted. We did. We'd go hunt deer before school in the morning. That's how close we were to wildlife and that type of thing. But I also, gained a great deal of respect for the outdoors and the opportunities that it gives me today. It's kind of interesting. I often felt while I was in Vietnam that my experience in Gunnison that taught me to survive came from the scouts and came from the outdoors. It wasn't something I learned in school per se. although that was beneficial. But survival is not something you learn in school.
The military doesn't teach you that overnight either.
No, no.
Yeah. So you met your wife and got married there and then came here
Yes,
before you went in the service.
yes, yes. We lived in Salt Lake for about a year and a half when I got my greetings from my local draft board. Said we want to talk to you, and I said, well, okay, great. I mean, when you grew up in that era, I graduated from high school in 1968, and everybody, from that point back, if you will, you kind of grew up with the idea that that's probably where you were headed in one way or another. So it wasn't a great surprise when it did come down, when I did get the notices, if you will.
So when you lived in Salt Lake, what did you do down there?
Started out in school, didn't do real well in school.
College
at Stevens Henniger's Business College. And didn't do very well in there, so I took several different jobs, but the last job I had was I was delivering bread. I would pick up bread in Salt Lake and go to Ogden and pick up more bread, and then go up the canyon and do Morgan and Hennifer and that area. That's where I was working when I got my greetings.
So you got your greetings, and it was just you and your wife living together at that time, so to speak.
Correct.
How did she feel about that?
Well, again, the era of that time, it was not a surprise. It was not like somebody slapped you in the face and said, guess what? You kind of, when you weren't going to college and had a college deferment or a mission deferment or something of that type, you knew you were headed. And so it was a surprise, and obviously emotionally it was tough, it was hard, but it was also not unexpected.
She knew there was a possibility you wouldn't come back. Of course, you both knew that, and she obviously was okay, not okay type thing.
Well, in between me getting, and let me back up just a little bit. I did get my draft notice, but I said I don't want to be drafted. And I don't know what it was inside my brain at that time. I didn't want to be drafted. My dad was not drafted into World War II, and I was not going. So I first went to the Air Force, and they were full. At that point in time, they had a quota, and they were full. I went to the Navy, they were full. I didn't want to be a Marine. Army was the only one that had anything available for me. So that's why I enlisted in the Army, basically. And then in between that period of time, we got pregnant. And Brian was born while I was at Fort Ord in training one Sunday morning.
Fort Ord, California?
In Fort Ord, California, right.
In your basic training?
That was in AIT, in my advanced infantry training. And so when I went to Vietnam, yes, there was Doris, but also had a 3-month-old baby that was there when I came home, and we're kind of jumping up here, but Brian had just turned 1 and he was walking, and he walked out onto the porch where my in-laws lived and where Doris was living at the time, and they said, "There's your daddy." And he looked at everybody like, "You're nuts." And he ran into the living room and said, "That's my daddy. I was a pitcher on the television." So that's how our
you met your
relationship.
son.
That's how our relationship started. But I'm grateful to say that I've got a very close relationship we're about as politically different as we could possibly be. But other than that, really a close relationship with my son.
Good. That's good. So, what about your early military? Where'd you do your basic training?
I did my basic training at Fort Ord, California. It's since been closed down. That the first airline trip I ever took was when I got on the plane in Salt Lake to fly to San Francisco to Monterey. And so all of that, I mean, that sounds so weird to young people today. They fly every place. That was a real big deal at that point in time. So I took my basic at Fort Ord. Fort Ord was an interesting place. It a lot of fog right on the Monterey Bay. We'd see a lot of fog. They had also, during the early 60s, had an outbreak of a disease in which we had to have the bottom side of the window had to be open 12 inches, I think it was, and the other side had to be the top for flow-through ventilation constantly. So it was, on a cold night, it was a cold place.
I can imagine. So, did any of your friends that you grew up with, did they enter the service?
Yes, there were not close friends, but people from Gunnison High School that went, and I have not talked to them since. I don't know what their whole story is. I can remember, when I was a kid, I was probably 14 years old or so. I was doing my home teaching with a gentleman, and we stopped into this one family's home, and I can remember them saying that their son was in Vietnam, and that's probably the first time I'd ever even heard of Vietnam, and that he was a lineman, a telephone lineman person. And so there were a few others from Gunnison that are there, but not there wasn't a great deal.
Did you do any training with them?
No.
Okay, so you were all by yourself.
I was
so to
by
speak.
myself.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you did basic there and then stayed to do your advanced training right there?
I did.
What kind of advanced training did you take?
I started out in radio operator training, and that was more, you had to do Morse code back then, and I could do Morse code, but I couldn't do it as fast as they wanted it done. Well, when you drop out of a school, your next school is infantry, and so that's when I got into infantry. As it works out, on the time schedule, that worked really well, because that put me 3 months into Vietnam later, which would have been, I'd have been right in the middle of Cambodia had I gone over on a regular time scale. Cambodia was a pretty deadly place for new people. So I consider that to be lucky.
So you dropped out of radio school and then went through a full infantry school?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And then leave before you went over, or did
Well, yeah. Actually, what I had done, I enlisted for ASA, Army Security Agency, given some promises that didn't quite pan out. And when I got to Fort Ord, I found out that the most they would offer me is a clerk's job. Well, I was young and dumb and thought that would be pretty stupid to be a clerk. So I enlisted in Special Forces. Well, Special Forces, once I got done with AIT, I go down to Fort Benning for jump school. Funny story here, when you generally started the morning running, and we'd run 5 miles or so, and then you go over to the pull-up area, and you would have to do 4 complete pull-ups and then you jump down and you yell airborne and you take off for the PT pits. Well, I did my 4, and pullet's always been the struggle, so it was hard for me. And I jumped down airborne and took off, run right over a captain. And I mean, when I say run over him, I ran over him. And he said, you know, the term was get down, which meant 10 push-ups. And so I did 10 push-ups and jumped up airborne, sir. And he said, no, you get down till I get tired, as he stood there and watched me. So I probably had done, I don't know, 50, 60 push-ups. What was the first exercise we did when I got to the pits? Push-ups. Well, by then I had no more strength in my arms at all. So that's when they say, go to the company and check out.
Find something else to do.
Yep, we've got another job opening for you. And I came home for 30 days before I went to Vietnam.
So let me get this straight. You joined, they didn't draft you?
I did join. I was not drafted.
And the draft was 2 years, so you spent, what, 4?
I was really smart back then. I could have been drafted for 2 years, but I was smarter than that, and I enlisted for 4.
Okay, and got the same results.
Yeah.
As if you'd have been drafted.
Yeah. So,
except for 2 extra years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand that. Did any of your instructors through any of this really stand out?
Yes. In basic training, it was kind of interesting. You know, when you first get off the truck in front of your basic training company, these drill instructors are screaming and yelling at you like crazy. You know, get going, get going, get going, and you know, you're scared. The first day, you think they're going to kill me. I know they are. But as time went on, you pretty soon found out that what their job was to prepare you for combat. And I gained a great deal of respect for Sergeant First Class West, who is my platoon NCO, non-commissioned officer, and Sergeant Gooch, who is the main drill instructor. And as basic went on, and we, you know, went to more advanced training and stuff like this, we'd have time in which we could just sit and talk and chat. And Sergeant Gooch had a lot of wisdom, a lot of things that he would tell us and talk to us about that made, you know, that I learned a lot from. I did. Sergeant West was a hardcore guy, but he taught how to, excellent marksman. He taught us those things very well. You know, have a lot of respect for the man.
When you did your advanced training, obviously it was infantry, but was it just infantry, or did you specialize in anything like equipment of any special equipment?
Not really. Infantry 11 Bravo, as the military occupational specialty calls it, was really encompassing small weapons. In other words, we learned everything from a 45 up to a 50 caliber. And any of those weapons in that group, when we're talking about the M14, the M16, the 45, the 1911 45, the law, the
law,
light anti-tank weapon.
What's that?
That's a shoulder. It's about this long, and you pull it out, and it shoots a rocket out.
So recoilless, basically.
Yeah, only they didn't call it recoilless because it was disposable.
Okay.
You would fire it and then throw it away. But, you know, we learned on grenades, we learned on M60. We had to be able to take the M60 apart and put it back together again, blindfolded. You know, that type of training.
So you didn't learn radios?
No, I didn't at all. And luckily, as time progressed, the fact that I'd had radio training before I went into infantry really paid out big time for me.
What did you think of the equipment that they were handing you and telling you to use?
I was a hunter as a kid, but that was all a straight rifle type situation or a shotgun. So an M16, for instance, that was when they were brand new, and it was sure sexy to look at, just as they are today. I felt that the equipment was could render punishment, shall we say it that way. The M60 was incredible. It just put out 600 rounds a minute, and the biggest problem you had with it was that you better not melt the barrel down with it. So the 50 cal at that time, and I don't know if that's still the case today, was the most accurate weapon the military had. It shoots a shell this big. If it hits you in the head, it'd blow your head right off. That was an impressive gun to shoot, but I never shot it after that either. So that wasn't something you packed.
No, they're not. So what was the hardest part of the training? Leaving the family behind or something else?
Oh yeah, that was very difficult, but it was also I was not in great shape, and so getting in shape was really a tough thing for me. And it's kind of interesting. I came close to washing out in basic because I couldn't run like they wanted me to. But it turned out that when we took our end of basic skill tests, I was in the top 3 of the company. And so I got an immediate promotion to E3 for that accomplishment.
E3, let's back up. What's an E3?
Well, that's private first class. So, just like GS is at Hill Air Force Base, you start out as an E1, then an E2, E3, E4, E5, etc. And so that's what it's just a pay grade, basically.
So you were making a little extra money because you were married and had a child. And
I was making
E3
extra money because I had done well in the test, and that I think that surprised the hell out of a lot of people because they didn't see me as being that smart. I hate don't mean to sound arrogant, but
what was the easiest part of it?
I think the easiest part really, when you come into a basic or any type of thing, you're mixing different people, different faith, different race, different. I had never in Gunnison there were no black people, there were no Hispanics or anything like that, and all of a sudden I'm thrown into these guys are literally right next to me in their bunk or marching next to me or whatever, and so but I also had the feeling, that was during the civil rights days and stuff like this, that all people should have equal opportunity. And so it was easy for me to assimilate with these guys and to understand them or try to understand them and learn from them, because it was, they lived a different life than I did, big time.
You and I went obviously different places for our training. I don't know what your food was like. Mine was terrible. How was yours?
You know, I've tasted worse. It's certainly not gourmet. I didn't, you know, the food was basic food. It was a slab of meat, slab of potatoes, and a vegetable. That's what every night was. And that slab of meat could be anywhere from liver to hamburger to a small steak, uh, and always overcooked. There was, you know, it was it was okay. I that of all the list of complaints I would have, that would not be
On the list,
yeah,
on top of the list.
yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. So, do you feel like you had proper training prior to going to Vietnam?
Nobody has proper training to go to war, especially in a combat role. That's I feel that way today. I feel bad for the young men that you know join the Marines or the Army or whatever with some perception of what they think is going to be, because when you get there, that ain't the way it is. And so, um, yeah.
So, but other than that, the physical training, the equipment training, do you think that was good enough?
It's never good enough, um, because now you have to learn not just the weapon, but you have to learn how to use the weapon in a combat situation. And I don't know that. I mean, they try to train that. You know, there's the what do they call it? The jungle warfare down in Panama, and they try to do that. But the fact of the matter is, I look at the Middle East and the conflicts that they went through with basically house to house fighting, and I just shudder. I just go, wow, these guys. I don't know how you would, because that was a totally different thing, you know, than what we are. So I don't think you are ever trained 100%, because I don't think it can be done.
So you got your orders to go overseas. You knew you were going to Vietnam. Did you know what you were going to do?
Oh, there was no question what I was going to do. I was 11 Bravo. I was going to be infantry.
And how did your wife feel about that?
I don't know. We're both kind of matter of fact people. It is what it is, and it was way too late to be changing anything. You know, you didn't just call up and say, "Hey, I'd rather be an air traffic controller," because they just said, "Who's this?" You know. So I think by that point in time, we were pretty much given the fact that I might not come home. I mean, that's a fact.
When you got there, where did you go?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I was an E3 when I got there, and we got there at night and landed at Cam Ranh Bay. And
Which is where?
It's about mid-country, right on the coast, roughly. It's a major port, etc. I can remember when they opened the door, the flood of heat that came in was just, I mean, you just almost felt like it was knocking you over. Well, when you're in the military, the officers get off first, the field officers the staff officers get off first, then the field officers get off, and then the senior NCOs, and then the rest of us are the last. So I was on the plane for, I don't know, 45 minutes or more before I was able to get off the plane. So I'm on one of the last buses over to the receiving area, and I get on this bus. It's just a regular Bluebird school bus, and I look, and there's wire on the windows, you know, and I wonder what that's all about. So since there wasn't many of us on that last bus, I asked the driver. I said, "What's with the wire on the window?" And he said, "Well, that's in case they shoot an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade at us, that it won't penetrate the bus." And that was the first time that I kind of got socked in the face with, "Hell, I'm here." That scared the crap out of me. And then and that was probably about 10, 11 o'clock at night. And they took us up, checked us in, all that type of stuff. They said, "All right, all infantry over here." So, well, what they wanted, we were the guard unit. So here I am, brand new guy, never been there before, never had no idea what was going on. They take me down to the gate, the main gate, coming into the thing, and said, "Okay, you're going to guard this." I said, "Well, with what?" And they said, "Well, here's an M16, but you don't have any shells for it." I'm going, "Well, they're going to attack me. I know they are. How do I defend myself?" They said, "You'll work it out." And I can remember the first person that walked in was a Vietnamese lady, and she come walking up the road, and I was scared. I mean, I'm going, "Who are you?" They hadn't given me any instructions, nothing. Didn't have a radio, didn't have anything. And I had to let this civilian in, and she had her card or whatever it was, and I just didn't know what to do, you know.
So when you got out of that and got assigned apparently to wherever you were going, who did you end up with?
First Cav.
The first Cav.
First Cavalry Division. Yes, I spent about a week at Cameron Bay just doing guard duty and stuff like that. And then I finally got orders down and went to the 1st Cavalry Division. Once I got to my division area, we went through another, I think it was 10 days of training. And that's where they brought in the zappers, and a zapper is a person that penetrates the wire with explosives, how they work, and they were generally people that had what we call chuhoid, which means surrendered. They were teaching us what a zapper does, because they created a lot of problems. We got to see the Cobra up close, the Cobra helicopter, gunship. Got to see it up close, see the rocket pods and stuff like that. We saw, they'd teach us loading and unloading out of a Huey. We call them a slick over there, at least my unit did. But that was, you know, you had to learn all those things, you know, how to mount and dismount in a hurry.
Like anybody was going to have to tell you to get off of that thing if you were getting shot at, right?
Yeah. But there was a way of seating too. I mean, people, I sat in the doorway with my legs hanging out. People, "Didn't you worry about falling out?" I did one time, and then from then on, I didn't worry about it. I knew that my butt would stick to the ground or the floor. And I've been on some pretty steep climb outs and stuff like this, and never had any problem. But that's where I departed a helicopter from. But I wasn't going to sit around in this clearing and wait to find out if it was hot or not. You know. Anyway, that's another story.
Okay. I'm going to go back a little bit. You said the 1st Cavalry. No horses, though, right?
You know, the 1st Cav patch, as you're aware, is predominantly yellow. It has a black stripe through it and a horse. Now, the history of the 1st Cav is literally Custard was 1st Cav, just to give you an idea. It goes way back. But they used to say about the patch, they said that It was the horse we never rode, the road we never, no, the road we were never traveled, the horse we never rode, and the yellow stood for itself. So, but I'm proud to say that, and I'm sure everybody says this, but I'm proud to say that I think the first Cav was one of the hardest fighting units in Vietnam. When you ask, you'll find that there's the first Cav, there's the Big Red One, which you were associated with, the Screaming Eagles, 101st, 173rd played an important part, and the rest of them were kind of support units. So I'm very proud to be an alumni of the first Cav. They were a good unit.
So when you got to your unit, did they just hand you a rifle and say, fall in line, or did they give you an assignment?
First, after our training, they said, okay, you're going to catch a bird. We're going to take you out to a fire base. Now, fire base is an area in which the artillery is on a certain plane that they give support shooting. I flew into Snuffy, fire base Snuffy, and that's where we spent the night, and it was a scary night. I mean, I envisioned NVA regiments coming across, the runway or whatever that was there. The next morning was log day for my company, so I went out on a log bird, and that was basically a Huey that it had the resupply, if you will, and landed in a spot that I just thought there's no way in hell we'll ever fit in that. The pilots in Vietnam were incredible because they could set a Huey down into an area that, we'd say can't be done. But anyway, we landed in this place, and there we were. Called into the main and said, "You're in 3rd platoon," and they said, "You'll walk point tomorrow." I said, I'll excuse me, I'll what? They said, "Yeah, we're moving out tonight, and you'll lead us tonight, and then tomorrow you'll be point man." Well, I later found out that there's 2 reasons for that, and I've had people argue with me on this, but I've also had people 100% agree with what I'm about to say. You put the new guy on point for 2 reasons. Number 1, he's scared to death, and he's really alert. The second reason is, and this is kind of morbid, but you don't know him yet. Point men don't last long, and so therefore, if he gets killed, well, he's not your buddy yet. And so that's walking point was an interesting experience. We were in dense jungle, and I can't emphasize dense enough. It was. I can remember there was a little vine that had a hook on it, kind of like this, and it would grab hold of your skin, and it didn't feel like much, and you just kind of yank your arm. Well, by the end of the day, both my arms were just dripping blood because these little things would just scratch you. We called them "wait a minute" vines, because you better wait a minute and take them off the right way, or they're going to cut you up there. So, and then my first CO, commanding officer, was Special Forces, and so he wouldn't walk on a trail. If we were following a trail, we boarded the trail in the rough, not on the trail, because of ambush potential. And so we were cutting forest every place, or jungle every place we went, and it was hard. It was by far the hardest thing probably I've ever done physically. It was pretty tough.
So you'd get out. Did you stay out, or did you go back at night?
No. Our rear was snuffy. Our company rear was Nui Benoit. Anyway, but we didn't have a place. We would go back to Snuffy and guard it whenever we went to the rear, and that was generally a 3-day event. But you'd go out on day one, and I'd spend as many as 24 days out. During this period of time, there's no clean clothes, there's no meals fixed. You're eating sea rats, sea rations, or they would generally give us what we call lerps, which was a freeze-dried food for our night meal. We had to carry all the water that we had, and they would relog us every 3 days. So you'd be out 3 days, and then they'd bring in a bird, replenish. If we'd had a firefight during that period of time, they might have to resupply us with ammo or whatever we needed because of the firefight. But I learned that I needed 11 quarts of water. That's what I carried. I remember that to this very day.
That's a lot of weight.
A lot of weight. I looked up on the internet and I said, what was the average weight of a pack in Vietnam? And they said it was about 70 to 80 pounds. Okay, so if you take that 70 pounds of food, water, my personal stuff, et cetera, then you add into it something else. In other words, I became an RTO radio telegraph operator. So I was the main RTO for the company. That meant I carried extra 2 batteries. There, I figured my pack was somewhere around 125, 130 pounds. There, and I'm a big enough horse that I carried it. You carried the 60. I carried the 60 for a short time, and the disaster with that is the ammo. The gun's heavy enough, but then you got to, by the time you put on, what'd you carry, 1,000 rounds?
I didn't know. I had ammo bearers.
Yeah. Well, the ammo barrel would carry more than what I would, but I would have enough to get the firefight going, sort of thing. But yeah, humping was pretty tough.
Did you get into a lot of firefights?
No, I didn't. I was the first replacement to my company after Cambodia. During Cambodia, we wiped out a lot of enemy. If Nixon and Congress would have let it go, we probably could have ended the war in another 10 days, sort of thing. That's how close we were. But what that meant is that we didn't have as many troop movements and combat units, et cetera, that were around. I've probably been in 10 to 12 firefights, and generally they were quick hit firefights. The Vietnamese learned that if they could catch us and just unload their clip and turn around and run, their chances of survival were a lot better too. Because whenever that would happen, we'd all fire back, but we'd also call in artillery. And that artillery, just to pepper the ground, probably cost $10,000. And they learned that this was kind of during the wind down of the war, and they knew that if they could just keep the pressure on us with little stuff, and if you look at the war in the Middle East that we've been, Afghanistan, et cetera, that we've been involved in, they learned from that. Hit small, hit quick, and run. there, and that's kind of what I was in. I don't pretend to be a hero. I just went and did a job that my country asked me to do, and would I attack a bunker and throw a grenade in it? Yeah, I would, if I'd run into that situation. In the military training, they teach you more than anything that you're no longer a person. You're an instrument, if you will, and if you can't hesitate. If the CO says move to the right, you do it now, because seconds could make a difference, and so you become almost a machine. You move in a natural. You know what's going to happen. You know when the firefight ignites, if you're being ambushed or something like this, you get down low and you fire your weapon. You make a lot of noise, see if you can't break the ambush. So yeah, I saw some, but I was not in any prolonged. I read stories of firefights that's lasted for days, and I can't imagine how rough that would be.
A lot of friendships are formed in a situation like that. You watch my back, I watch yours.
Sure.
Do you stay in touch with any of those guys?
I am in touch with 3 guys that I was in Vietnam with. We're not, I wouldn't say we're overly tight or overly close, but we communicate 3 or 4 times a year over the phone.
So I want to kind of break away from this a little bit. What about reunions?
I have not attended any reunions. A lot of it has been, when you come home, when you get out of the service, life goes on. And you're busy going to school or working or whatever it is. And then you get this notice in the mail that says, hey, we're having a reunion back east. Well, again, in my day, that was still a very expensive thing to do. You would, if you got on an airplane, it was going to cost you $500, $1,000 to fly back east and stay, et cetera. So I didn't know. I have not been to any reunions or anything like that.
But you do stay in touch with a couple of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get back over there again, if we will. Did you ever fear for your life?
Absolutely.
I mean, intimately,
I don't,
than all the time, obviously.
When you're an infantryman and you understand and appreciate this, you're functionally scared to death every minute of your life. You know that you are a target, period, especially if you're in a hot area. And we would term them a hot area. Hot means that there'd been some activity there, et cetera, et cetera. That's mainly where we went in that. So yeah, fear was something that you just dealt with. You couldn't allow it to. I mean, when you allow it to take you over, that becomes a problem. That becomes literally a mental health problem, as we know it today. And so you can't let it take you over. I had an incident that happened in August of 70. We had been sent out to an area that a company had been there a week before and got shot up pretty good. They sent in our company, and we had spent 2 days in just constant little firefights, just constant. Well, during one of those, we captured a guy, put him on a helicopter. They flew him back and flew him out the next day and said, "This guy knows where everything is." So there was 2 platoons. So that's about 75 people roughly, and the main CP, which I was in, the command post, that headed out, and we knew we had to kind of hustle because we didn't get him picked up until like 1 o'clock or something like this. We headed out, and about a click away, 1,000 yards away, we got ambushed. They knew we were coming, and so we formed what we call an NDP, or night defensive perimeter, basically a circle, and we called in artillery. Now, when you call in an artillery strike, they won't fire it across you unless you're in contact. Well, we were in contact, so we asked for them to fire for effect. One of the guns was misaimed, and so we got 3 rounds in our perimeter. Friendly fire. It killed 5 guys and seriously injured 4 others that we had to medevac out that night. It was getting dark and rainy, and we had no heavies. We had just the ground to sleep on, basically. That was extremely frightening. That was, I mean, to have 3 rounds, 105 round. A 105 round has a killing radius of 35 meters. Well, we were within 35 meters of all 3 of those rounds, and it was, they're also really loud. But that was a very terrifying time. And then, having short numbers and none of our night stuff like claymores and stuff like this, I don't know that there was much sleep done that night. And the rain, I learned there that if you sleep back to back with another guy, that you can stay a little bit warm. So I learned that on that night. The next morning, we had another bird come out and hoist the dead, and then we headed on back. So that was by far the most terrorized that I've ever been and ever hoped to be. Pretty scary night.
Did you end up getting wounded?
No. I lucked out. Today you'll see somebody that is about my age and he's lost a leg or something like this, and I always try to go talk to him because I really feel lucky. I do. I feel lucky that I came home in one piece, and then Agent Orange comes with you. And
Agent Orange.
Agent Orange is an insecticide that they use to,
Insecticide?
Weed killer, foliage killer, that they would use they would fly and drop it into the jungle. Well, nobody knew that causes cancers, it causes diabetes, it causes heart problems, et cetera, et cetera. So those of us that was in it, and basically everybody that was in Vietnam was in it, have suffered medical issues. I've had to have open heart surgery. I'm a diabetic, and thankfully I don't have any cancer. But the sad part of it is that stuff stays with my posterity. And I could have a great-great-grandchild have a cancer because of Agent Orange. Now, Agent Orange was not orange, but that's what it was called, was Agent Orange. And it was basically Roundup, you know, and it very poisonous to the but I guess you could say they didn't know about that. Not enough testing had been done when they decided.
Or they knew and wouldn't say.
When true, yeah. And, you know, the Vietnam Veterans of America has done so much to help with that type of thing. And guys like Ken has done a lot of work to get us to be able to be have our disability because of it, you know. So I came home not with gunshot wounds, but with
PTSD
chemical wounds.
When you came home, you spent a full year there, right?
I spent 11 or 10 months.
10 months.
I was the color guard, brought the colors of the Cav home.
Okay.
There.
So the Cav came home, you came with them.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So when you got home, what did they do with you?
Well, because I had enlisted for 4 years, I was then assigned to go to Fort Ord again, where I worked in the reenlistment office. I really thought that that was where I would depart the military. Loved my work, loved where we were staying. We had a great time. It's where I started my firefighting, was in Marina, California, part of my life. And all of a sudden I get orders and they say, we want you in Germany. I had 9 months left. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. I was an E5 by then, and that means that they pay for all of your moving costs and stuff like this. And I said, it's going to cost, I mean, I fought like crazy. I said, look what it's going to cost you to send me to Germany. Well, they said, yep, and we're glad to do it. So I went to Germany, was a clerk. Going back to Vietnam, when I came out of the field, Captain Chitty was my CO, arranged for me to go to a school, a 71 hotel, which was basically a personnel school. And so I was able to change my MOS, or not change it, but have an additional MOS. And with my skills, I worked in a reenlistment office, kind of specialty clerk, if you will.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I learned a lot.
So if you enjoyed it, why did you not re-enlist and stay in?
I almost did, actually. I was stationed at Oberammergau, Germany. That's where the Passion Plays happens every 10 years, and wood carving capital of the world. And I get out there, and everything's cool, everything's fun, and I got a new CO, the battalion CO, and his name was Colonel Camp. And Colonel Camp was a certifiable.
Yeah.
Okay. And he and I can remember walking into his office the first day and sticking out my hand and said, Colonel Camp, I'm Sergeant Embley. And he looked at me, because that's not the way you're supposed to do that. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and I just really blew it. Snapped to attention and saluted him, and he said, don't you ever, you know, I mean, from then on, it was every time he'd see me, he'd find something wrong. So he basically put enough water on my fire to re-enlist that I decided to get out.
Looking back on that, if that hadn't have happened?
Here's the thing that concerned me. Of my 3 years, 11 months, and 28 days of being in the military, all but about 3 months of it, 4 months of it, was overseas. I saw a lot of NCOs that had spent their whole life in Germany, for instance. And I felt like I wanted to be an American, not a German. And so that bothered me a little bit. That was during the period of what they call a variable reenlistment bonus, and they would give me $8,000 if I'd re-upped. I had a critical MOS. But I just, when I really seriously looked at it and thought, I'd rather live in Utah than in Germany. So that was a big factor.
It's fair.
Yeah.
Do you remember the day you got out? How did you feel?
It's kind of interesting because what happened is, I took my car to Bremerhaven, and it came over on a ship to New Jersey. And so that was done 3 months before I even got out. I got out, we traveled to Frankfurt, got on the plane, flew to New Jersey.
Wait a minute, you said we.
My wife.
She was with you in Germany.
We'd had another child by then.
Okay.
So
all right.
there was the four of us. And we flew back, and the jet lag really wiped Doris out. I mean, big time. Well, the next morning I had to be in New Jersey to pick up my car. So I picked up my car, found out they bent the wheel on it. So I had that to change and all this stuff to do. And they said, meet at this building at such and such a time. And I don't even remember it, Ken. I just know that I was done. It was the latter part of August. It was hotter than hell, and I had a Volkswagen Beetle that had the, 255 air conditioning. In other words, two windows rolled down and 55 miles an hour. That we packed up and headed across the country. We couldn't get out of there fast enough.
With four of you and all your luggage and stuff in a Volkswagen.
Yep.
That's worse than combat. Once you got back here and settled down, what did you do for a living?
Well, my intent was to go to Utah State, and I didn't do very much planning, and all of a sudden I realized that you need money to do that. And so I went to work for Sears as a salesman in Logan, and with the hopes of someday going back to school. Well, all my family was now moving to St. George and Cedar City area, and I saw SUU and thought that's a pretty cool place, and so went there to go to school and worked full time and went to school at SUU.
Did you pay for this out of your own pocket?
I had the VA, the veterans.
The GI Bill?
The GI Bill, yeah.
So they helped pay for your school?
They helped pay for it. I think that was, of course, by today's standards, I think we were making something like $400 a month or something like that, which, that plus me working got us by,
Sure.
That's all.
Okay. Have you used any of the other veterans benefits since then?
My health care is almost 100% done by the veterans right now. We've got a great veterans hospital organization here. Great. They can't do enough for me, and I'm number one. So yes, I've used them a lot. I'm now 100% disabled after my open heart surgery, sort of thing. So the VA has taken care of me very well.
How were you treated when you got home?
You know, as all Vietnam vets will probably testify, coming home was a different situation. Vietnam was an unfortunate and I shouldn't say unfortunate, but it was an unpopular war, and the people, the civilians, contrary to today, blamed the soldiers for some reason, and so you'd come home and you would try to do something. And I can remember I went to a resume shop that did resumes. I figured I'd have a professional resume done, et cetera, and wrote down all the things and handed it to him, and he worked it up, and he says here you're a Vietnam vet, and I said yes I am, and he says you don't want to put that down. What do you mean I don't want to put that down? And he says that's a negative. Now here I am. I've just gone and done what my country has asked me to do, and people were putting me down
For doing it.
Because of that. I ran into a situation, frankly, that I just, for a long time, in fact, for a long time, I just didn't talk about it at all to anybody. My wife, who had lived through seeing the news every night, wondering whether or not that was me, et cetera. She basically said, I can't handle it anymore. I'm sorry, I can't be your sounding board. And there wasn't anybody to be your sounding board. And so I just didn't talk about it. And I can remember when the Vietnam Memorial was dedicated in Washington, I was working as a salesman, and I was out in the Farmington area, and I was listening to it on KSL probably, or a radio station, and I had to pull over because I started to cry, and it hurt so bad to know that what I had done, what I had gone and done for my country, risk my life every day, I had nothing to be ashamed of. And from then on, I decided I wasn't going to be silent. I can remember I was back in Washington, D.C., and I was at the Washington Memorial. I'm waiting to go up in the Washington Memorial. This couple in front of me, they were probably 10 years older than me. She said to him, I wish this line would get moving faster because I really want to go over and see the Vietnam Memorial. And he responded back that, oh, that's not such a big deal. He says, why worry about that? We shouldn't have been there anyway. And it like somebody slapped me in the face. And I said, excuse me, I'm sorry to have eavesdropped on your conversation, but I am a Vietnam veteran, and I want you to know that I just went and did what my country asked me to do. And those men down there are the very same, in the very same boat, only they're dead and I'm alive. I think they deserve some respect. And of course, they apologized up and down. But that was kind of the attitude, was that, somehow we were at fault. Today, the news media will say the war we lost in Vietnam. We didn't lose the war. There was not one firefight that I was involved in that we didn't annihilate them. There was not one area that we went into that we didn't I mean, we could have wiped Vietnam off the face of the earth. So now I'm being blamed for losing a war when in fact it was a political situation that went in. Um, Again, going back to Cambodia by itself, that was a political decision to get out of Cambodia. Political, 100% political. He had so many days that he could have the troops in there, and he had to pull them out. And it was, I mean, we saw that constantly over and over and over again. The decisions that were made from a political point of view, not from a tactical point of view.
So because of all of this interaction with the public, did it change your way of thinking about people in general, or even towards other veterans?
No, I don't think it did. I will stand up for myself now, and have done for years. I won't allow somebody to talk bad about you and me, or what part we played in the war or anything like that. One of the reasons that I want this recording is to make it available so that people understood how us soldiers felt and what we went through and what we gave. Those are the things that I want to have happen. Is I want to see a situation where those things are no longer a bad thing.
And it appears that things have changed a lot.
Oh yeah, and quite honestly, I hate to call it hurtful, but it has panged a little bit in the heart when you see guys come back from the Middle East or Afghanistan or whatever, and they meet them in the airport with the signs, and all this stuff. Well, that wasn't in my day. You kind of crawl back in,
Mm-hmm. So, did you join anything when you got back, veterans organizations other than the VA?
I did not. As soon as the Vietnam Veterans of America came about, I joined that as a lifetime member. But I have not, no.
Do you think it's a worthwhile organization?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because of what they've done for the soldier, for the veteran, the things that they have fought in Congress for in our behalf. As we talked about Agent Orange, that wasn't even a deal until the Vietnam Veterans of America got a hold of it and were able to fight for it. So yes, it's a worthwhile deal.
Would you go back and do it again?
I'd do it in a minute. I'm proud of what I did. I didn't do anything wrong. I just hope that what we have learned through Vietnam and Afghanistan and everything else is that war is a sticky thing, and it's really, really hard to get out of, especially when we want to fight it from a political point of view and not from a tactical point of view. And I would hate to see my grandsons, I have a grandson that wants to be a Marine. Dummy. No, he wants to be a Marine. Well, I'm fully supportive of that. I really am. But I don't want him to have to come home to being a bad guy for him simply doing his job.
Totally understandable. Do you think that presently we have enough military available if we need it?
No, but we never do. We always have a lull in numbers or whatever to start with until we build it up. Do we have? I think my biggest concern with the military today, from my observation, is that it's not there's just a whole lot of people that don't. I mean, when we used to run in the morning, we ran in our boots. We didn't go change into gym shoes. And I see that and I go, what kind of toughness? I know that's a little thing and almost sounds stupid, but what kind of toughness do we have in our youth today? What do we have the physical toughness? Do we have the mental toughness? I mean, today you can pick up a cell phone and you can call literally all over the world. I made 2 phone calls in Vietnam to my wife from what they called a Mars station. And a Mars station was using radio operators throughout the country, and you'd have to go, "Hey, honey, it's your husband from Vietnam, over." And then she'd say, "Hey, it's good to hear from you. Brian's doing good. We're moving on. Da 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 da. Over." That's how we communicated, and we had 4 minutes.
It's not like today, is it?
No. So
there's been some talk about reinstating the draft. How do you feel about that?
I feel that the military is such a good experience overall. A person building thing, that I don't know that I'm against that. I saw some really good draftees that were good men, really good men. You know, should everybody have to give some type of service to our country? I don't think that's bad.
So not necessarily the military.
Well, the majority would be the military, but if somebody wanted to, I mean, you know, President Kennedy started several programs. I can't even remember the name of them. Hope, I think, was one of them, in which people could go and volunteer their time to build a better water system or whatever. If somebody's doing that for humanity type situation, I have no problem with that. I can call that as service.
I've got a couple more questions, and one of them is kind of an obvious one that people ask all the time, especially those that have never been in combat or been to war. Did you kill anybody?
No.
Was that because you never fired your weapon, you didn't have a chance, or because of the jungle and you don't know whether you did or not?
Yeah. No, in a firefight, what happens is everybody fires. The concept of that is that, yes, you're hopefully firing at an enemy, but you're also making one hell of a racket, making you sound bigger than what you are. And so I fired my weapon a number of times in that type of an event. Have I put somebody in my sights? No, I haven't. I didn't. Would I do it? Yes, I would. I was trained to do that. It was kill or be killed, and I was not ready to die. So I wouldn't have hesitated. The situation just didn't ever arise.
And I guess last for me would be, are there any reflections out of all of this from start to finish? The interview process too. It's kind of a broad
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're
Well,
asking.
how do you feel about this interview?
I feel, again, I feel that people need to understand and know what Ken and Reed have been through and why they did what they did. Uh, they need to know that when a lot of people have told me, well, you probably are very much for war, and I'm not. I'm very opposed to war, and the reason why is because I know war, and I hope my grandkids don't have to go down that road. And so I think the interview process here is very good for people to be able to look back and say, I mean, some of the questions that we've talked about today came from some of my relatives, and I just simply asked the question, is there any question that you haven't asked me? And I was kind of surprised at the type of questions that came back. None of them hostile, but sort of hostile, sort of certainly not understanding. And there was a lot of people that felt like Vietnam veterans were drug addicts and everybody was on drugs, and my sister-in-law asked me that, and I said no.
You're just a Marine.
Well, you have to be that to do that. Anyway, yeah. Were there people that used marijuana in particular? Yeah, there was. We had an element within our company, probably 10 guys, something like that, out of 100 that were users. But you got to understand that when you're in the field, and you're seriously in the field, and how it works is I protect you and you protect me. If you're high, I have no use for that. And I just as soon shoot you as I would the enemy, because you're showing a disrespect for the brotherhood or whatever you want to call it. Drugs were not, I think possibly in the rear, drugs were more prevalent than they were in the field. I don't know. I was never in the rear. When I was a personnel specialist and basically the company clerk for a few months there, I didn't see any. Now, maybe I was naive and dumb. I don't know. But I really honestly didn't see any of that type of thing going on.
So, any reflections? Anything you want to add to this?
Well, I really hope that our politicians, the people that are making the decisions in our country, understand what a big decision sending young men and women off to war really is. It's not heroics. It's not a big deal. It's you are taking that person and multiplying it by several thousand, and that group now is different in their life. It was 4 years before I really started my education out of high school. It was 4 years before I did much at all. So in other words, my peers are 4 years ahead of me in school, in careers, etc., where I had my life on hold. And we need to realize that, and again, if you want to be a lifer, that's great. That's great. I have no problem with that at all. But I think we need to really understand and work hard to try to negotiate things instead of fighting things. And let's not go to war. Let's not be so willing to go to war.
I have to agree with that. Well, I guess that's about all I have, except for
Thanks, Ken.
welcome home, brother.
Thank you. Welcome home to you. Thanks for all you do.